1300 hours, which I guess is the time that we must start our meeting. So I think good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the committee. Welcome to you, Minister, HOD, and your team. I am Leon van Wyk. I've now moved from one cluster to another cluster. So just as I was starting to get used to my previous cluster, I'm now with you. So it's great to be with on this team, and I look forward to working with you. So today we have a couple of presentations before us. Being briefed on the annual performance plan and on the last 2 quarters of the 24-25 year. I think I'm just going to give the members an opportunity to greet us for the record, and then there might be a couple of members on the Teams platform. And then I'll move over to you, Minister, and HOD to introduce your team. So over to committee.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's Dave Bryant, member of the committee.
Good afternoon, Chairperson. Good afternoon to the officials and Minister. My name is Noko Masipa. I'm a member of this portfolio committee. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, MEC. Good afternoon, colleagues. My name is Noel Constable, and I am a member of this committee. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm French Mbombo.
Then just on the Teams platform,
good afternoon.
Go ahead.
Yeah, good afternoon. Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, colleagues. Khalil Barankes, a member of the Finance Committee. Thank you.
Good afternoon to you. Over to you, Minister, and your team.
Thank you, Chair. I think let's start with the introductions. Congratulations on your election, and welcome to both the economics as well as the innovation cluster. This is where the magic happens. My name is Deirdre Barman, MEC Finance.
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, members. Tulanda Kantana, Head of the Department.
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, members. My name is Victor Senna, the DDG for Fiscal and Economic Services.
Good afternoon, Annelies Pick, Public Finance, Provincial Government.
Good afternoon, Chair and members. Steve Kenyon, Chief Director, Local Government Finance.
Good afternoon, everyone. Jason Fackeline, Provincial Government Accounting and Compliance.
Good afternoon, everyone. Brandon Gordon, supporting Interlinked Financial Systems.
Goedemiddag. Good afternoon, Sanbonani. My name is Isaac T, Director, Local Government Public Finance.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Santi Roy, Director, Local Government Supply Chain Management.
Good afternoon, Chair and members. I'm Kim K. Nietling, Director, Local Government Public Finance.
Good afternoon, Michelle Nicholas, Provincial Government Finance.
Good afternoon, Taryn Frantidero, Budget Office.
Good afternoon, Chair and members. Anna-Marie Smith, Chief Financial Officer.
Good afternoon, Chairperson and members. It's Nadia Ismail here from the Directorate Strategic Operational Management Support. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair and members. Valencia Peterson from the Strategic Management Unit.
Thank you very much. I was very interested to hear the word magic, or the term magic, being referred to, which I think is certainly an upgrade from where I've come from in the world, because we used to talk about pulling rabbits out of a hat that we needed to do. So I'm not sure whether, I think magic is possibly a little bit more exciting and more innovative. So over to you, Minister.
Thank you so much. I just want to also just make an apology for our officials in the Governance and Asset Management Unit. We left them behind at the KZN joint cabinet briefing, but they're on their way as soon as they are able to. I know some of our information systems people are also, they are here, and then Oh, so he sold that side. Brandon's here. Okay, fantastic. And some of the budget team members are frantically busy trying to put all the data, not frantically, to put all the data together for us in the Pero as the different chapters get compiled and signed off and edited and reviewed and so on. However, and I'll start with the magic maybe, Chairperson. I recently had a conversation with someone where, we spoke about how, is government able to save everyone? And then I said to this person, you know what? There's this whole story about this boy being at the ocean on the beach, and all the starfish were flooded out of the ocean. And this boy is busy throwing the starfish back. And someone came to the boy and say, you can't possibly save all of the starfish. What are you doing? Like, it's not going to happen. And the boy picked up the one starfish and he threw it back in the ocean and said, but I can save this one. And he picked up the second starfish and he threw it back into the ocean and said, but I can save this one. And he picked up the third and he threw it back in the ocean and he said, I can save this one. So when I speak about magic, Chair, it's not all unicorns and rainbows in the world. It's not all sunshine and roses, but we do the best we can with what we have and with the team we have, and we believe in our people. So in Provincial Treasury, and when I speak now generally about the APP and the SP, and the team will get into the technical items, I specifically focused on 4 values for a reason. 3 of them are mainly covered by the Constitution and or law, and then the 4th one is a bit of an add-on. The first 3 are fairness, really making sure that the laws that we bring to Parliament are fair in the way that we do things, the proposals we make in terms of revenue and its impact, that we fight for our fair share at a national level, both vertically and horizontally in terms of Section 214 of the Constitution, that we focus on trust. And when we speak about trust, we speak about things like our Pero documentation, where we table our data and evidence before we start the budget process, so that we are all on the same page regarding what the social and economic status is in our province at a given time. That we table things like the municipal economic review and outlook, because it's not just metrics for us, it's also being able to capacitate and assist our municipalities with what is happening in terms of the metrics. Are things improving? Are things declining? And how we can bring those type of things into the budget process. It's our budget documentation. It is the fact that we've published the first ever local government budget performance review last year, where we're tracking things like operation expenditure and capital expenditure, and how we're really making sure that we have cost reflective tariffs over time. It's all these different types of publications that are also assisting us in making sure that we are a government you can trust. It is things like capacitating our municipalities through the financial management grant that also assists with trust, because we need to be able to work with municipalities quite closely in terms of their long-term financial management strategies. The third one is value for money. Are we making it easy to do business with government? And that's where things like our procurement client center is coming in, how we work in terms of value for money, in terms of our procurement, the type of systems we're putting in place in order to make it easier for someone to become a supplier, the training that we do, the webinars that we do, the queries that we deal with, the fact that we publish procurement disclosure reports. And then finally, it's innovation, and that's the one that's the cherry on the cake, really, where if we make an assumption that we're not going to get any more money from national, because that's the baseline we have to work from. It's if you get more money, wonderful, awesome, great. But you have to make the assumption currently within the economic environment that we're in, that what if differently, and you have to think more innovatively about things. And when you think about that, you're going to have to say, okay, what do we need to put in place? And that's why we launched our alternative and blended financing framework, because we want the whole of government to think of finances in terms of, can we work with society in order to achieve something? Can we work with the private sector? Can we work with development banks? Can we work with philanthropists? Can we work with donor funding? Is hybrid capital an option? Is bonds an option? Are we able to speak about these different types of alternative and blended methods, both off balance and on balance? And those are just some of the type of things that we are putting in place and continuing to work on in the Treasury. And that's over and above some of the statutory matters that we have to do, that you'll sometimes see either both in the Finance Committee and or in the Budget Committee, and making sure that we really able to capacitate our departments and our municipalities. Because in the Treasury, like we always, say we're enabling and reliable partner. So many people might not see us as a service delivery department, but actually we are, because we need to be able to help capacitate and enable departments in order to deliver that particular service, to be able to get to that vision, in order for the PSP to get to that vision of growing the economy and creating jobs. Some of this we also do quite closely with .P as well. You'll notice in Budget Committee, for example, we work closely with .P. We work together on financial and non-financial information. But without going too much into the technical detail, I'm going to hand over to the team just to take us through all the key items. And if there's something we've missed that the members would like to highlight or ask us from the APP, we are ready to answer where we can. Thanks.
Thank you, Minister. I think as per normal, we will go ahead with a presentation from yourselves, and then we'll take questions thereafter. So over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We'll cover first the APP and then the third and fourth quarter. Nadia is going to take us through. Thanks, Nadia.
Thank you, Chairperson. Good afternoon again to the members, honourable members, colleagues. It is my privilege for me to present the Western Cape Provincial Treasury's annual performance plan for the 25-26 financial year. And this forms the first year of implementing our new 5-year strategic plan. This APP that we have demonstrates our commitment to sustainable financial governance, effective service delivery, and then also positioning PT as an enabler and a reliable partner. On this slide, you will see that there's a process and some timelines that have brought us here where we are today. Over the past year, we have engaged with multiple strategic sessions. So we've had sessions with integrated provincial governance, knowledge management, infrastructure, and effective local government. Drafts were submitted to .P at various stages of the year before final submission to the provincial legislature. But in a nutshell, what the slide demonstrates here is that the APP has not been developed in isolation. Instead, it reflects an intense and multiple robust engagements, improvements, and then also alignment with the PSP. Our strategic priorities for the next 5 years are anchored very strongly in a very clear vision. And that is for us to be a responsive and inclusive treasury that enables positive change in the lives of residents. So we will deliver this through 3 core commitments. Firstly, resident-centered governance, sustainable service delivery, and innovation and adaptability. These pillars define how we position ourselves, not only as a compliance function, but like I said, and we can't emphasize this enough, as a strategic enabler of provincial as well as local government performance. So on the slide, it also outlines our mandate. in the context of governance transformation and integrated service delivery. So our priorities are integrated provincial governance, effective local government, strategic supply chain management, and efficient infrastructure investment. And these are supported by our enablers, such as talent management, ICT, and then knowledge management as well. Altogether, it reminds us that our strategy, our structure, and our culture is necessary for it to align so that we can deliver optimally. Next slide, please. We've also ensured that our strategy is aligned to the PSP, to the Provincial Strategic Plan. Treasury's work directly supports our provincial priorities, such as economic growth, job creation, safer communities, and a caring society. So together with the Department of the Premier and the Department of Local Government, we are very committed to harmonizing our efforts across both provincial as well as local spheres. So this then reinforces the role that we play as an enabler and a reliable, trusted partner. Together with .P as well as DLG, we are committed to harmonizing and streamlining governance for maximum impact at both the levels. So our impact statement captures this very clearly: sustainable financial governance and service delivery that optimally responds to citizens' needs. So this is a mechanism that we wish to make use of to allow us to do this as effectively as possible. And this is encapsulated in the ICG framework, the Innovation Culture and Governance Framework. So ICG will help us to drive productivity, agility, resilience, trust, as well as workforce competencies. And these are all essentials not only for a future-fit provincial treasury, but a future-fit public sector. So through digital transformation, through evidence-based decision-making, as well as ethical leadership, we can strengthen our responsiveness as well as our accountability. On the slide, it shows our PT strategic priorities and how it is linked directly to the ICG enablers. And this will ensure that our work is connected to the broader governance ecosystem. For example, we have alternative blended finance, and this fits nicely under infrastructure investment. We have e-procurement under supply chain management transformation, and we have integrated planning under government alignment. On this slide, we are unpacking the flagship initiatives where we as a department have a direct enabling role. So these include alternative and blended finance, sustainable infrastructure facilities, collaborative integrated planning, and e-procurement. And each one of these initiatives is designed to close the gaps in financing, to streamline processes, and to build resilience in the public sector. These flagships are not abstract. Instead, they represent the very practical contributions that we make to a systemic reform. So we're now going to move to the bridge between strategy and execution and provide a consolidated overview of the 25-26 APP, aligning the strat plan outcomes with our year one indicators. And just give a high level overview of where our programs will focus in the first year of implementation. We will now move into the detail of each program. So moving to the APP itself, like I said, it's an overview that indicates how we want to bridge strategy with execution. Here we are showing how our strategic outcomes for the 5-year are translated into measurable outcomes for the first year. Program one, on this slide, we are showing that it is focusing on strengthening financial and corporate governance. to enable a well-managed department that empowers all other programs. So key initiatives that we have identified for the first year is the introducing a co-pilot AI agent to automate our HR processes. We are implementing Power BI dashboards and reinforcing financial governance through expenditure monitoring and compliance. And this is all about strengthening our internal backbone so the department can deliver outwardly as well as credibly. Program 2, Sustainable Resource Management, is our largest program. Nearly half of the budget is allocated here. It focuses on the sustainable management of provincial as well as municipal fiscal resources, and it includes budget preparation, revenue and expenditure management, fiscal policy, socio-economic research, and municipal financial recovery. Importantly, this program also houses the key initiatives like alternative blended finance and infrastructure facilities, which are vital for us to close the fiscal gap and drive service delivery. Next up, we have Program 3, and they're called Asset Management, and the focus here is on strengthening governance and oversight of financial systems, supply chain, and asset management. And the key priorities that they have identified include the rolling out of the electronic procurement systems, upgrading the evergreen legacy systems, and establishing a centralized data warehouse and business intelligence hub. This program, asset management, is critical for ensuring efficiency, value for money, as well as transparency. Continuing with Program 3, our work in this area also supports municipalities with supply chain management improvements. So from MSCOA compliance all the way to asset management practices, as well as supplier database solutions. This is about modernizing procurement and asset management across both provincial and municipal levels. And then last but not least, Program 4, Governance and Accounting, plays a big role in driving governance transformation and accountability inside of departments, as well as entities and municipalities, as well as making use of the integrated talent management strategy to strengthen our assurance frameworks, piloting automated financial statement solutions, and then implementing MSCOA reforms. This program, ladies and gentlemen, is about embedding transparency as well as responsiveness across the system. In closing, just would like to add that the APP is more than just a compliance document. Instead, it is our roadmap for strategic plan into action in the first year. Across our 4 programs, we are committing to innovation, sustainable financial governance, and stronger partnerships with departments, municipalities, as well as residents. We can't emphasize this enough. As a provincial treasury, our role is to be both an enabler and a reliable partner, and to ensure that every rand and cent that is spent is done so responsibly, and that we as a government are better positioned to deliver the services to the people of the Western Cape. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Nadia. Maybe a chair to the committee, through the chair. Our APP and what we have set ourselves as goals and how we want to create that enabling, was just saying an enabler and a trusted partner, is requiring of us to think differently about how we go about achieving our mandate. So the emphasis here is on innovation, and it's on building those partnerships and then adaptive leadership. The committee will be aware that we come from the previous financial year where we had quite a number of vacancies. And so we have indicated then that we are going to do everything within our power to begin to fill those. And that is certainly what we're doing. And within IC&G, when we talk about our strategy, when it talks to capacity, capability, and well-being, then giving effect to what we have captured and what Nadia has presented in terms of the APP would require all of these elements as it comes together within our people's management strategy to work together. And it's pushing us, and not only us, but it's also how do we take the system forward together with our partners in the Department of the Premier, as well as the Department of Local Government. So, Chair, that's it from our side, just a high level in terms of our APP for 2025.
Chair, just to also highlight, I know the some of the previous the committee chair and other members also asked us about HR and so on. So in the current financial year, part of something that we heavily focus on is trying to make sure to fill our vacancies. It is a difficult process. I know from our GAMS team, for example, there's one position. Well, there's more than one position in that particular job description. But for example, we received over 7,000 CVs just for the one position. So on top of the work that someone in the Treasury has to do on a day-to-day, they must still be able to go through all the things that are submitted in order to make sure that we're able to fill those vacancies. It's a bit of a chicken and egg situation because you feel like your workload is increasing because of it, but your workload's also not going to decrease until it's filled. But we are working very, very hard in order to fill those. And in the current financial year, so you'll probably see it coming through in the annual report of next year, hopefully, how we're really pushing to fill those particular vacancies. But we are still committed, and I just wanted to mention that we're still committed to giving feedback to the committee also as we go along. Thank you so much.
Just looking for guidance here. Are we able to hold questions until we do the quarterly report and then do them all together? Okay, so I think we can do quarterly report as well. Thanks.
Good afternoon again, everybody. So next up, I will provide an overview of the departmental performance for the second half of the previous financial year, specifically covering quarters 3 and quarters 4. So that is 2024-2025. As the slide in front of you shows, our performance remained very strong as well as consistent across both quarters. The performance remained robust and stayed above the 90% achievement mark in both quarters. Specifically, we achieved 91% of our targets in quarter 3 and then 93% in quarter 4. So a detailed quarter-by-quarter breakdown. In quarter 3, we had a total of 43 targets. Of these, we successfully achieved 39 targets, or 100% and above. This translates to a 91% achievement rate. Like I said, we only have one target that was partially achieved, falling within the 50 to 99% range. A small number of targets, 3 to be exact, were not achieved, and this falls into the 0 to 49% range. In quarter 4, our performance improved even further. Out of a total of 59 targets, we achieved 55, pushing up our achievement to 93%. So in the next few slides, we'll just unpack quarter 3 and quarter 4 in a little bit more detail. So there was a total of 43 performance indicators reported on during the third quarter. 91% of the indicators met their targets, with 4 that were not met. And the underperforming indicators all appear in Program 4, and they have to do with a number of reports based on governance performance held with the departments, the publication of the ACS-FS, number of interventions to inform the application of accounting standards for departments and entities. and a number of support initiatives on internal audit and risk management. We've also supplied you with the detailed QPR model that contains all of the reasons for the underperformance. I don't want to spend too much time on that, and I'll tell you why. On the next slide, we are unpacking the fourth quarter. So there were a total of 59 performance indicators reported in that quarter. 93% met the targets. The underperforming indicators appear in program 2. So it's 1 in program 2, 2 in program 3, and then 1 in program 4. And the reason why I don't want to go into the reasons is because while these indicators were reflected as underperformed in the fourth quarter, all of them eventually achieved their targets at the end of the year. So the root cause of the underperformance across the indicators was not as a result of a non-execution of the planned activities, but rather it had to do with the late submission of the portfolios of evidences that they needed to provide in order to substantiate it. So because we didn't get it in time, we were not able to reflect it as having achieved. So these were subsequently then received by us, checked and validated to substantiate the performance that was met at the end of the day. So if we don't look at the two quarters, quarters 3 and 4 in isolation, but we look at the position as at the end of the financial year, there were 67 indicators altogether, and only one of them did not meet its target, which meant we achieved 99% of the targets for the financial year. Thank you.
I just want to quickly check, do you want to maybe go through the specific items? Because, for example, you might see a partial performance, but for example, there was an audit at one of our municipalities that was delayed because the service provider, for example, was ill. But, you know, you still do the work, but because of the way that you have to report targets in that particular quarter, for example, it's not achieved. Or for example, you know, when the provincial revenue audit was underway, we had to write to the speaker to ask, can we table that particular, can we do that particular tabling later? The tabling was the Speaker of Parliament was informed accordingly, for example, and you know the documentation is in order. But because of the way we have to report the targets, is you will see, for example, then partial performance or non performance. But maybe not if you just want to go through the few like more specifically.
Okay, so let's then unpack the detail in terms of the indicators that have underperformed, and we'll take it from quarter 3. Firstly, we have number of reports based on governance performance engagements held with departments. So these governance engagements were completed earlier than planned to manage resource constraints. So they were able to foresee that they were going to have staffing concerns, and therefore they conducted the planned outcomes or outputs in a quarter in advance. With regards to the publication and tabling of the ACFS done in the required time frame, the annual consolidated financial statements were not published and tabled on time, and this is because the Provincial Revenue Fund, the PRF audit, was ongoing at the time. So this audit process then delayed the ACFS submission due to the dependencies between the two processes. Then we also have the number of interventions to inform the application of the accounting standards to departments and entities. So there were progress that was made in improving the data suitability for municipalities. So some accounting standards interventions were postponed due to external factors that were beyond our control. So in other words, the planned number of interventions to inform the accounting standards for departments was not achieved. The NT working group session that took place in November impacted this process. But like I said, the output was achieved in the following quarter, thereby leading us to have achieved the annual target. Then from the point of view of the number of support initiatives on the internal audit and risk management, there were delays in the risk management in the Laingsburg municipality, and this was due to the service provider's illness, as well as an agile auditing pilot that had taken place in the Stellenbosch municipality. Due to a late appointment, it resulted in having to push both the projects back into the next quarter. So there are on these contexts and the reasons explaining why, mostly outside of our control.
Good, thank you. I think I'm going to go over to the members now for any questions that you may have. I see Member Bryant and Member Msipa, Member Nkondlo. I think you can go ahead in that order.
Thanks, Chairperson, and thank you to the Minister and your team for the presentations. The first query I've got is, and I suppose it's maybe a request for presentation at a later stage, and we can maybe cover this during the resolutions, but I really would like to dig a little bit more into Program 4, the governance and accounting side of things, with strengthening the financial management processes across departments, entities and municipalities. We know about Beaufort West because we were there recently, but I think getting a presentation at some stage in more detail as to the interventions that are currently underway to strengthen the financial management across our various municipalities would be very beneficial for us. Then, just in terms of Quarter 3 and 4 and the performance of Program 4 that you've mentioned earlier, whilst I fully appreciate that those targets were achieved by the end of the year, it does still come across a little bit sloppy when there are almost 50% of them in Quarter 3 that haven't been achieved. So, I suppose my question is, what are the interventions the department is looking into to address those so we don't have a repeat in the coming year? I mean, for instance, what you mentioned around that audit process taking place, surely there must be a way to balance that so that those targets can be submitted timeously. And secondly, what happens in the instance of a service provider being rendered ill or unable to conduct that function? Surely there should be somebody else who could step in during that time to replace that, or is it a very specialized skill that only that one individual is able to carry out? But all in all, thank you, and I think there are a lot of very good outcomes and achievements overall. Thanks.
Thank you, Chairperson. Really thank you, the Minister and the HOD. The presentation is quite insightful, and well done to you on the work that you have done. I think my question is really just a plain and simple one. We had, on Program 3, the asset management, supply chain management, and so forth. We previously had the supply chain procurement law being amended. I just want to get a feel in terms of how is this amendment, affecting you in terms of delivery, because I know that we did raise some concern. You did raise some concern with regards to the proposed amendments at the time. It's been ascended and signed into law. I just want to get a feel as to whether, has had a negative or positive impact in terms of the work that you do. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon to the colleagues and the Minister and her team. Chair, on my first question, I'm not sure whether it's me missing the gambling board quarter report. Is it okay? Don't respond with your because now I read your reaction. Yeah, so allow me, maybe the chair is gonna allow you to answer, so that I'm not disturbed my train of thought, Minister. I just wanted to ask that, and perhaps you'll answer. And in the quarter four, I think Member Bryant has covered me, on these delays, because I'm sure late submission should actually be a serious matter, because that's why you've got, particular obligations to submit information for audit, for performance assessment at specific times. So I think it's something that we would need to sort of improve upon. And I always HOD, as a former bureaucrat myself, I always worry about targets that are outside of one's control. Because once you have such as part of your performance plan, and the individuals that must actually implement, you are always going to get to this point where you must come and explain why things have not been achieved because they are outside of your control. And it always begs the question whether how smart it is to put targets that are outside of your control, considering that you are part of an ecosystem to deliver on things. But I think it's one issue in the smartness of targets that you must always try to consider, because it's going to be difficult then when you have to report and you report on things that are outside of your control. It sets one up to a very dicey results type of management approach. So I think it's just one concern just from the performance report, Chair. And then I think in the APP, I just wanted to check, and I understand that the full document is with us. The first thing I want to understand, when you talk citizens in the context of provincial treasury, who is your citizen? What's your definition of citizen? And how does provincial treasury interact with citizens to inform your budgetary processes, your planning and everything? And I think we've had this question asking even in your public participation. I saw Minister starting something with children through the Children's Commission as part of, I'm sure, trying to get to this answer of who is a citizen from a provincial treasury context. And then in as far as the flagships initiatives, I'm interested, are these flagships because these are just projects that are aimed, at being implemented? And if so, what is their time frame? When are they intended to end based on the outcomes that are here? And then, Chair, the issue of human resource, perhaps it's good that Minister also had to come back and speak to or affirm the committee that the issue will be attended to, because this has been a sore point in this treasury. And I would want to see between program 1 and I see in program 4, you talk about capacitation. How is the HR environment in treasury? Also being part, because I think one of the things about APPs, people like to plan for external and don't plan for the actual people who must deliver, So for me, it's important to see highlighted the internal environment that must deliver, so that people do not crash. So that when you look at the section on people in the annual report, we don't find stories there of people leaving, en masse, of people tired and all of that. So I'm interested to see how are you dealing with that. And my last one on this one, Chair, is on the reforms. I see under
governance and accounting, that implementation of MSCOA reforms. I am not sure whether it is the same program that is actually looking at the series of reforms that are happening, both at a local government level, because I'm sure you'd have seen that there is both at a national level and even in the province, there is reforms that is taking place in as far as local government is concerned. And those reforms automatically comes with, impacting on the fiscal governance of the municipalities. Let alone that I know that as a province, we've always been championing. The minister is a big person on the issue of the fiscal or the equitable share formula. So I'm interested whether those issues and every work that is it done under Program 4 in terms of looking at the broader reforms that are happening within the fiscal space in the country, because it's no longer only, the province, but also in the country. So I'm interested whether those would fall under Program 4. Thanks.
Thank you to the members there. I think I'll sort of just add on to that, and I think just sharing Member Nkondlo's concerns in terms of the financials for Q3 and Q4. I think that would obviously be useful, but we'll deal with that. Then, if we're looking at the flagship initiatives as part of the APP, we talk about the alternative and blended finance program, as well as the sustainable infrastructure development and financial facility, SIDF, as I think it is also known. From just looking at the practical implementation of those programs, because I think that is really what needs to happen and that we need to get to. When I was mayor of George, and I was trying to think back as to when we started to talk about SIDF, it's probably in 2021, well, somewhere in that era. And it was something that never came to any form of reality. You would enter into discussions, municipalities were asked to put forward projects. Projects then get put forward. And for instance, on a water treatment works, you can't leave that on an if and when basis at some undetermined future year. You actually need to, if you're sitting at this time of the year and you need to put it on budget next year, those negotiations and that implementation has to take place well before the decisions are made on budgets. In other words, that is going to be a funding source, and you can actually go out to market or make use of that facility. So to me, I think it is something that we need to understand what is the practical rollout and how one's actually going to implement any of these. And I think all of us are well aware of the predicament that the country sits in terms of water and water treatment and wastewater treatment type of facilities that need to be upgraded and need to be done pretty urgently. And I imagine not only in the rest of the country, I'm sure there are municipalities within our province who would also want to be part of that sort of process. And to me, to have a facility that is covering a number of municipalities, to me, there should be some form of argument that one can put forward that would be a bankable type of facility. And I think the same goes in terms of the blended finance programs, because if we are going to implement that for various projects, we need to understand that is a program that can be put in place within a few months, that one at least has the financiers and the backers of those projects ready to move. So perhaps just if we could get some comments on that, please.
Thank you so much. I'll try deal with some of the high-level items. My understanding of citizen is what is in the South African Citizen Act. I know in South Africa, legally residency is defined differently depending on what you're talking about. I know my favorite definition of residence and residency actually comes from tax law, where they have a bit of a better quantification of residence, but also residency is also covered by your legal status in South Africa in that regard, citizenship versus residency and so on. But citizenship, to my knowledge, is governed by the South African Citizens Act in our country. In terms of future presentations on strengthening financial management in municipalities, we're more than happy to do so, Chairperson. And we wait your guidance and the committee's guidance and direction on those items. On the targets, so for example, with the audit process, there's certain dates that we have to comply with for submission. But AXA does the auditing before we allow to submit those documents. And you can't submit it until AXA is done with the audit. So we don't do the audit of our own Provincial Revenue Fund. We don't do the audit of the Provincial Treasury. AXA, the Auditor General, does it. So if there's a delay in the audit process, I have to then write to the Speaker to say there will be a delay, and then that when the audit process concludes, that we will submit it accordingly. But the reason you do that notification is because there are actual dates that we have to comply with submitting something at a particular date. And I can't submit non-audited documents on the Provincial Revenue Fund, for example. So, for example, that was that particular item. But it was submitted. It's not something that you're going to forget about. So you likely see it at the end of the annual report, that the full year. So something might not have necessarily have been achieved in that particular quarter, but it could have been achieved in Q4, for example, and then you'll see it in the annual performance targets that it's completed. But on that particular case, it's because we were waiting for the audit process to conclude, and that's why we didn't reach that particular target. But I'll ask the team just to come in with some of the other targets and mitigation processes for going forward on those items. On the Procurement Act, as the member will know, that we have launched a Constitutional Court challenge against the Procurement Act. We have, before the launch, we wrote to the President, we wrote to the Finance Minister, and then we launched the Act and so on. The National Treasury, based on the Act, has to put regulations in place and have started working groups, but our argument is you can't put the regulations in place if there's if the argument is that the Act is unconstitutional, because by virtue of unconstitutionality, your regulations would also be unconstitutional. And we are currently we haven't put the papers have been filed, served. We've received notice of intention of opposition from the National Assembly and National Council of Provinces. The Amobungane Investigation Unit, I think I'm saying that correctly, I'm hoping I'm saying that correctly, have also requested the court to join our application in order to challenge the Procurement Act. I know the City of Cape Town has launched against the Public Procurement Act, albeit from different perspectives. They are a local, they are a metro, and we are a province. So certain sections of the Act would affect us a little bit differently. But I'll ask our team just to come in regarding the content of the key elements that we're dealing with. And this particular launch is relating to especially public participation and procedural matters, but I'll ask the team just to come in, and also the impact on the work that we currently do, how it would impact. On the gambling targets, I've only received a notice, Chair, that we brief regarding the 2025-26 annual performance plan of the Provincial Treasury and its quarterly performance report for the third and fourth quarters of the 2024-25 financial year. However, Chair, we're happy to brief on gambling and racing matters. We wait your guidance and notice on such matters, and we're happy to come back on that. On the targets outside of our control, it does happen because you also don't necessarily want to change a target that you must submit the consolidated financial statements at a certain time, because that one is in law, if I remember correctly. So certain things in law, and you don't want to then say, okay, that is not a target, because we must still follow the law. And it's important that even if the audit process is late, even if we must write a letter to say we're going to submit a little bit late, we must continue to maintain the discipline in the system. So, for example, I wouldn't want the target on that to be removed, because we must still follow the law. We must still submit our statements by certain times and so on. So that is quite important. But we will have a look at the ones where it also is affected by external stakeholders, and how we can possibly tighten up some of those targets. In terms of the flagships, it's called flagships. It's the way it is written is to that as a government, we've been asked how are we responding to the PSP. So we, as the Provincial Treasury, we play very much in the innovation, culture, governance space. So when we see the flagships, those are the type of projects that are speaking to the innovation, culture, and governance cluster. We do support departments on some of the other work within the other priorities. It's just not necessarily considered a flagship, but it's part of our general day-to-day work. And I think the word flagship mostly relates to how we highlight where we are making a big contribution in terms of the PSP particularly. In terms of the capacitation and the HR environment, if our team can just come in as to where we are in terms of that and just give some feedback. In SCOA reforms, this falls within the local government space that we are assisting with capacitation in municipalities, and our team can come in here with that. Equitable share formula, I think that falls on program 2. Program 2 mostly, yes. Because that falls with fiscal and economic services, but the team can come in there. And we've been having conversation with both Gauteng as well as KwaZulu-Natal regarding there's the horizontal part and then there's the vertical part. And with the horizontal part, even when we are making sure that our data is updated, that the PES is reviewed to remain relevant, that the pie of the PES is not increasing. So you're moving money around provinces on the horizontal space. But on that space, you also just need to make sure that there's fairness in the system and there's fairness in the metrics on how you get to the outcome. But then you have the vertical space. So for example, municipalities get about 9.7% of the national budget split, and it should actually be at a minimum of 10%. And provinces get about 42%. So it's between provinces and municipalities. It's just over the 50% mark, whereas we are arguing that the pie for all provinces need to be bigger, that the budget split, that's the vertical part, that before your national departments, you have to first make sure that can we get municipalities to 10% of the national budget? How can we increase the pie for the provinces as a whole, for all 9 provinces, especially because we have a lot of big mandates that we have to implement on behalf of governments and so on. It's, particularly things like the impact it has on health, on education, on the social development, those type of programs. Yes, and then I'll just ask the team just to speak more about where we are in terms of that work. I know National Treasury is still planning to host a workshop with all the different provinces, the MECs, to unpack some of these issues more further, and we await more information from Provincial Treasury, National Treasury in this regard. In terms of the alternative and blended financing, we do have a section in the alternative and blended financing speaking about how municipalities can work with us in this regard. And I'll just ask the team to come in here as well regarding those particular sections. And we've completed our circular for our departments, and we've asked municipalities that should they wish to work with us, that we just coordinate things well between them and the Department of Local Government, because there's alignment there. I must say, though, that municipalities have been playing in the space of alternative and blended finances for much longer than, for example, a province, where there's specific laws that actually make it easier for them to go out to market, or to get a loan and so on. Whereas with provinces, it's actually quite a new concept, new work that we're doing really as the 9 provinces and so on. So it's a bit easier for municipalities, but I'll just ask the team just to go through that process, because there's also things like municipal loans committees and so on. And then in terms of submission, for example, what we also do is we try our best to work with municipalities to also identify what those particular alternative and blended financing options could be. For example, BFI is technically an alternative and blended financing option. So some municipalities have the capacity to do their own BFI applications. They don't necessarily need our help. However, the Provincial Treasury is always ready to, if a municipality requires help with a BFI application, that we're able to assist with that type of capacity, and making sure that we're able to help follow up through the system in that regard. And then when you get your BFI funding, if it's successful, you won't see it landing in the provincial government budget. You'll see it landing then in your municipal budget, because it won't come through that necessarily. Yeah, and for the more technical items and going into detail, I'll just hand over to HOD and the team.
Minister. So through the chair, let me start off by saying, because I think some of the questions is perhaps directed to a specific program, but the way we are structured, especially in terms of our response to local government, it is an integrated team, which means it cuts across the various programs. So maybe to indicate, so we do regular oversight and support, and if all the activities that we do in terms of the municipalities. So we can certainly come back to the committee if that is a resolution and provide a bit more detail in terms of each and every area that we cover in terms of the support. Then I think the question around, the question was in relation to the local government white paper and the reform, because to respond to Member Nkondlo, the reforms, are we providing input? I'm going to ask Stephen maybe just to expand on this, and we happen to go into a TCF Lekgotla starting tomorrow, where this will be further unpacked. So it's very much, it's alive, it's happening right now. And so we are, in addition to the comments that we have made, obviously continuing continuous engagement around this particular area. And I think it covers quite a number of issues, because it touches on the financial sustainability of municipalities, and perhaps what that reconfigured future will look like in terms of the local government landscape. Then I think also I need to just reiterate the fact that we undergo, in terms of finalizing our APP and determining how we couch the indicator. So with the Department of the Premier, they assess it. So I am comfortable to say that the indicators are smart. I'm putting it on record. All of our indicators are smart. And I think Minister touched on a little bit on it, because I think as a Treasury, we are largely driven by what is our legislative mandate. So a lot of the things that we are putting in our APP we can directly link it to a requirement either in the PFMA or in the MFMA. And so some of these things are time bound. And I think we also need to just keep in mind that the Provincial Revenue Fund gets audited separate from the votes. So the AG then must first complete the audit of the votes or the departments, let me put votes, and then it can come to the PRF. But also I think one needs to keep in mind that for them, it's the same team that goes from municipalities, they go from the MFMA into the PFMA. They just concluded the PFMA, if that is on time, they can start the MFMA audit on time. If that is late, then that has got certain repercussions just in terms of us. So I don't think we, so we are going to keep the target because that target is required in terms of Section 55 of the PFMA. If something happens, then there's also the legislation provides us with a clear direction in terms of what we need to do should that target not be met at that particular point in time. Just in terms of the issue around the service provider, I think it's a procurement process, and then it makes it very difficult to jump from one service provider to another. The procurement team will go into. So when the service provider falls ill, then because there's very specific rules, we unfortunately can't go from the one to the other to make up. So I think that is something that happened, and we were trying to manage it within the confines of the law and what is allowed in terms of the regulatory framework as it relates to SAM. Then I think the flagships. I think Minister touched on the flagships, but just to say, I think now it would be important, even for our flagships, to ensure that it lands. And I think also what we're recognizing in the new APP is that we need to reconfigure ourselves as in terms of a future fit treasury. That's the process that we are also undergoing at the moment, because although our SP and hence also our APP is quite ambitious, there is a need for us to also look at how we configure ourselves as an organization in order to respond to that. So that is also work that we are currently undertaking. Yeah, I think I'm going to leave Stephen on the, and you also maybe on SIDEF, we're working with the Department of Local Government, so maybe if you can start there, and then on the local government white paper, which speaks to the broader fiscal sustainability issues on municipalities. Thanks.
Thank you very much, HOD. So just to start from SIDEF, Chair, SIDEF is run from the Department of Local Government, so I wouldn't want to go into the specifics of that, but I mean, we hear your frustration about the time that it's taken. I think all I would say is that SIDEF is a very ambitious program in trying to do something new in municipal borrowing. From our side as the Treasury, what is important is that municipalities continue to borrow and finance infrastructure. So you've seen a number of projects that are on a SIDEF list that municipalities aren't waiting for SIDEF to figure out all the complexities about bringing in foreign donor financing and blending that into a package in quite a complicated instrument. Municipalities are going ahead and borrowing, and municipalities are going ahead and getting BFI funding for some of those same projects. So the projects aren't stopped, but the gains of SIDEF in terms of having longer and more affordable loans that would allow more infrastructure investment, that is still kind of the ambition that SIDEF is driving towards, and that we're very much partnering with the Department of Local Government on. On the question of the broader reforms in local government and the white paper space, I think it's a very exciting time to be in the local government policy space, because there is an openness to change at the moment. So I think everybody sees the crisis in local government, and I think we're very proud that in the Western Cape we have more municipalities that work and can show what can be achieved and what can work in local government, and also where the real difficulties are, even when you're doing your best to implement the laws as they are at the moment. People still run into the kind of reporting difficulties, the the overburdening of municipalities, etc. So we're very clear from the provincial treasury side that in engaging in these policy debates, we need to first listen to our municipalities to make sure that we're conveying into the national structures views that aren't just the views of the provincial treasury, but that come from our municipalities as well. So, I mean, we have a series of ongoing engagements. We're very on the ground and in touch with our municipalities. But in addition to that, we've run specific workshops to discuss the issues and to make sure that we're listening to. So we've had, experts flying in from Pretoria, part of the white paper team, to come and listen to our municipalities give their side of the story. I was just this week, Jalinda was HOD was referring to the TCF, the Technical Committee for Finance, Lekgotla, that we're going to, and reading the summary documents for that. It's great to see the extent to which there is a kind of common understanding of the challenges that similar issues, very similar issues, are being raised by all of the provinces, all of the municipalities across the country. I think the difficult stage we're at now is trying to get from that kind of common understanding of the problem to what the possible solutions are and what can practically be implemented. And that's what we're engaging in. What we're finding a lot there in that space is that a lot of it is interlinked. So there are these questions around the scale of the design of the fiscal system, but also obviously we know that there is a lot that is underperformed, that is municipalities aren't getting value for money on the expenditure side, etc. So it's not just the revenue envelope as well as revenue collection in municipalities, but also on the expenditure side. And we see that although we talk about the design of the fiscal system, a lot of the places where we underachieve are due to failures in kind of governance and political interference, etc. And so the whole performance of the local government system is very interlinked in those ways, which makes it quite difficult to identify sort of specific reforms that will fix, because you've got to touch on so many different parts. So it's a complex space, but as the Western Cape Provincial Treasury, we're very determined to make sure that we're listening to our municipalities, conveying those things and actively participating in those national reform processes. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, Chair, I just want to respond to the MSCOA. There was a question whether all the reforms has been driven under Program 4. As indicated by the HOT and also what Stephen have communicated, it's actually an integrated approach. However, what we've done on Program 4, because it's such a huge project and it involves budgeting, in-year reporting, and also end-of-year reporting, we have created a mechanism in Program 4 to coordinate those functions, but it doesn't take away the responsibility of the different components within the provincial treasury. So as far as MSCOA reforms are concerned, it is a business reform, and each and every component within the PT that deals with local government is picking that up. Then there was also a comment on Program 4 as far as the indicators are concerned. We noted the comments from the member, but I also just need to indicate that sometimes it's a bit confusing if you present quarter 3 and quarter 4 in the way that it does. If you present performance across the year, then the program have delivered on that. Maybe it's just in terms of the quarter 2 targets that were not reached, but reached in quarter 4. It is to do with, as we've indicated, the service provider that we appointed. We've got a service provider that we appoint across the province that assist municipalities, and those are unfortunately individuals, because it's individual expertise that we're buying in to assist municipalities. And of course, the other one was as because of the extension of some procurement processes. I'm just going to ask Nadia to maybe just deal with some of the procurement law issues that the minister referred to.
Right. So the challenge that we've put to court at this time is dealing with the procedural issues. So looking at the constitutionality from a procedure perspective, a public consultation, and more specifically, the inclusion of Chapter 4 as it refers to preferential procurement that was not part of the commentary that we had submitted and only raised at the time that the bill was assented to. So that's in core in terms of the procedural issues. The substantive issues are not dealt with in this challenge, given that you needed to go via the High Court and have that reviewed by a High Court before you attack it on a constitutional level. So if we succeed, we would not need to challenge the bill on the substantive issues if we succeed in this round. However, some of the most salient aspects is around Chapter 4 and in terms of how it's written, in terms of target setting, set-asides, etc. Because what you would take note that it appears that the entire portion of the 2017 regulations have been now included in the final act in terms of the issues that were part of the previous judgment with Sakalika versus the Minister of Finance. So you would see as well that there are many aspects around how the Constitution is written around preferential procurement and when it should be included, especially as it relates to how organs of state would then need to implement that. So that's a big part of the challenge. However, there's other aspects around substantive issues, basically around the disconnect between the PFMA and the financial regime and how you deal with procurement as a whole. So it's almost creating a kind of silo mentality within procurement, whilst in the province we've looked at integrating a lot of the financial processes with procurement and having succeeded in budgeting and planning and delivery. It would take us back in terms of if that bill is implemented in the manner that it has. There are other aspects around other sector-specific legislation, particularly with local government, around CIDB or the immovable asset management or infrastructure issues that also pose implementation challenge, but a big portion of it is around centralization of procurement and having a central kind of impact, whether it's at a national or provincial level, whilst at the same time kind of disconnecting from portfolio mandates, etc. So there's a number. So that's just at a higher level. There are other things that are good about the Act that we could live with, particularly on capacity building and some of the requirements on tech, etc., that we quite support. However, the bigger issues are too big to ignore because it would mean us shifting in the way we already operate and all of the good initiatives that we've already got underway. However, at this point, I think although the bill has been assented to, given that the regulations have not been issued, so you're not at the level where you're not implementing the Act. The PFMA still applies and the Preferential Procurement Act together with the regulations on both those acts. We have at this point taken a decision at Cabinet, particularly as it relates to preferential procurement around stability and how we manage as a province. So Cabinet Resolution 544 of 2022 reinforces a prior a resolution that was taken at Cabinet in terms of how we then proceed with implementation of preferential procurement, because we did in 2017 not apply the discretionary requirements that were constitutionally challenged later by Sakalika. So we implemented the compulsory requirements that were in the regs, and we kept that stability going on. I think it's just the local content that was prescriptive then that now is no longer in play, which does impact on how you implement local implementation, local content implementation. However, there are ways in which you can deal with it in our current supply chain system in terms of defining policy, etc., which we've encouraged our departments to do in process. In the meantime, the status quo in how we've implemented our treasury instructions as well as our accounting officer system will still hold true. And we are in the meantime looking at other means to deal with preferential procurement policy, and how we would then do the research and the commodity analysis, etc., to look at ways in which we can then, more meaningfully implement local empowerment, empowerment to SMMEs, and more so than we've already done. Because what we have found that through direct compliance with the rules, we've actually exceeded the targets of what the preferential procurement policy framework is stating. But our bigger departments, our bigger ticket procurement items, etc., we are researching that in terms of how do we then position economic viability and empowerment and be able to take that further in the province. So many of that is now taken up in our operational plans within the Treasury to then, conduct that research, consult with our various departments, and then we use what we call the problem-driven iterative adaptation model in the province under the DG, where we look at those kind of solutioning, particularly with the group group 1 of the PDIA that deals with strategic procurement in the province. So all our departments are part of that process, and we will define solutions and the way forward on that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I'm sort of looking at members. If there are any further questions that we may have. I see Member Bryant, I see Member Nkondlo, I see Member Masipa. Okay, I think you can go ahead. I don't think there's anything on the hybrid platform.
Thanks very much, Chairperson. Just in terms of the performance indicators, I think perhaps one of the challenges is when the document's quite thin like this, we don't have all the individual KPIs. So I think maybe it will be beneficial to just have those specific sections so we can say, okay, great, this is, and you can then see what the challenges are and the reasons, because that would certainly be beneficial. Just in terms of the service provider. So, I'm certainly not requesting a deviation from the SCM processes or anything like that. But merely just in terms of due diligence when it comes to selecting these service providers. Surely there is a gap in the system if one is employing a company whereby if one individual gets ill, the process cannot continue. So I wonder if that is something that could maybe be looked into going forward, and maybe just a little bit more information as to what the role of that individual is. And it's an enormous amount of responsibility for one person to take on should something happen to them and they become incapacitated. So I just want a little bit more information on that. Thanks.
Thank you, Member Bryant. Member Nkondlo.
No, thank you, Chair. I think on the targets, I think partly Member Bryant covers, I think, what is our concern. And I'm sure colleagues would take that in the spirit in which it is being raised. The point I want to also check, maybe Chair, we may need maybe in the resolution to really rethink how we take up this engagement on the APP. Because if one looks at how we deal with annual reports, I think we go through the book so that we are able to engage, with the substantive information that is there. So I'm just worried with the APP, because this is a very APP that we must then look at its quarterly reports here and then also the annual report, because indeed the summation made by the colleagues through the presentation, leaves a lot of information. And I think as documents were shared with us, I think on Friday, and you had to read a lot of information, we may not necessarily do justice, with the time given. One of the points in the APP of the department, I would just want to maybe understand is the rationale behind in the main, your targets are more quantitative, the number of reports, the number of assessment, the number of this. So if you can help me understand what is the rationale behind that? If your work is about quantifying the number of activities that you have to do, who and at what point is the quantitative aspect of that work, then who assesses that, And I'm raising this, for example, I think earlier on, Member Brian spoke about the situation in Beaufort West. I'm not sure how it will be covered in terms of your quarterly target, the type of municipalities that are in distress in the province. How would you be monitoring? How do you set a target for such a municipality? Will it be around the number of reports that gets to be done? And then when do we see the actual change in the municipality? Because your targets are counting the number of writing report about the municipality rather than looking at quantitatively, is the change taking place? And one goes through all of your targets. Majority of them are about the number of this, the number of that. So it means, it could be on one hand, you are saying the work that you do is more routine. If you have to produce 6 reports, you can predict that, it's just a repetitive act of work. So I'm interested in understanding that logic in your setting of targets. And actually, if also you still sit with this issue of, how you set your targets. If you consider your baselines, I think in page 54, as an example, you talk about the assessment of municipal budgets. And then in 2024-25, you would have had 60 of these reports. And then in 2025-26, it will be 58. I can't intelligently say what's the basis of that. I don't know why they become 60. I don't even know why they become 58, So that's also another issue. And also in some, you'll find that there's a revision of indicators, in page 50 as an example, on the municipal engagement reports, they were at 30, they were revised, now it's 28. Even there, sitting the side of the room and having responsibility to oversight your department, I am not empowered to understand why they're 30, and why they become 28. Just the logic of baseline is that if you are able to achieve something, obviously you can't then target it downwards. Maybe you must explain again that logic of how you set targets. I think in page 66 as an example, you've got there, I think a target, just wanted to open my book, where I think the previous achievement was 5, and then it jumps now to the new target to 32 as an example. So I'm trying to just understand the logic of the arithmetic behind your quantitative based targets versus, the qualitative aspect that is not coming through in terms of how you set your targets. Then the other issue to the department and to the minister is that this is an APP of the department that takes place at a period where the country is going to go to local government. And we know of the serious risk of this, especially because we've now entered into the arena of coalitions, which has actually had direct impact to municipal governance, decision-making at that level. And I think this issue, I'm not sure why it gets to, because I think we've asked it even during the annual report, in terms of emerging risks. That this is a matter that we have started to see, that in the change of political administrations, in the municipalities, that had a direct impact. Either sometimes you find councils do not sit, or meet to attend to matters that needs to be decided upon. It could be budgets, of those municipalities. And once again, I am not sure in as far as the work, yes, it will be sitting in whatever program, but I'm saying if I have to look at it in your APP, in your plan to mitigate such particular risk, where am I going to find something that is known by everybody, especially because you are getting at that particular situation, and history has actually proven that. And then on the issue of gender-based budgeting, as much as I think it is referenced to in the APP, if I were to look which indicator in the indicators that you have, which indicator specifically speaks to gender-based budgeting of the department, if you can take me to that so that you explain to me, how this particular intervention that is also mentioned in the APP, is located in this particular program, this is the particular outcome and how we are able to sort of plan around it and the envisaged outcome thereof. So I thought, Chair, I think those are just some of the issues. Actually, my last one is on the borrowing of municipalities. It may not necessarily have been here. I didn't see it. Maybe I missed it. But in the borrowing of municipalities, maybe I've got two questions based on the recent issues in the public domain. One, I am not sure when municipalities have to take up borrowing, what is the role of the provincial treasury? Especially because municipalities that we're sitting with are also, from a financial point of view, they've got their own challenges. So who then is able to make an assessment of whether these municipalities, and I'm not saying, you are babysitting municipalities, because we know municipalities are a sphere of government on their own, independent whilst interdependent. But I'm trying to understand, in the interest of also protecting, vulnerability or exposure of the municipalities, who does that work of actually looking at the exposure of the municipalities to go, to the market to look for loans? Is that work that gets to be done by yourselves as part of the process of the municipality? And if so, where is such located? Because also there is an aspect of public participation in that. Are municipalities consulting with the citizens, whom by virtue of these particular obligations actually are committing future generations, with the loans that they are taking up, and actually committing future leadership of those municipalities? If we take, the recent robustness in the different parties that gets to be involved, because any party that takes up a loan, the next party that's going to get in there clearly would actually be, taking up that particular liability from a decision of the incumbency of those that would have taken such a decision before. So I'm interested just to understand that particular work and how it gets done. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, thank you very much. Yeah, I think my question was answered, but I just want to follow up because now we've got the court case, as you indicated, and obviously, if your court case do not succeed, I think the question is, what will then be the impact, one, on service delivery in terms of having to implement this new law? Secondly, is on cost implication. If those two aspects can be answered, I'll appreciate. Thank you, Chair.
Right, over to you, Minister and HOD.
Thank you so much. I'll try again deal with some of the high-level items before we go forward to the technical things. On putting the annual targets next to like the quarterly ones, I think we can definitely try and do that, because sometimes what happens is you might not achieve it in Q2, but you might achieve it in Q3. So it's very much possible for a department to still achieve all of the annual targets, even if the quarter, for example, if you, for example, missed it by one day. But I think that will give more of a overall view as to where in the year one is. And I think that's a great idea. In terms of the service provider and thinking about possible mitigation, if the team can just come in there. On some of the targets. So for example, I remember there was one of the targets that we had to review because Metro reports to national. So when we speak about municipalities, we always say 30 in the Western Cape, but actually the Metro is a separate type of municipality to the others. So because the Metro reports to national, there's certain documents that go directly to the National Treasury. And even though we do, for example, assessments, the reporting lines are different. But I'll just ask the team just on those particular indicators regarding the municipalities, because if I remember correctly, the 58 was actually the 29 times 2, if I remember correctly, which is why there's 2 missing from 58 between 60, because the 2, I think, refers to the Metro that we had to revise down from 60 to 58. But if we can just, if the team can just check for me so that we can make sure of those items. With the municipalities, it's also really difficult because we play a different role in terms of municipalities as what we play within the provincial government space. So, for example, you have a space where you have to play the role of capacitating municipalities and assisting in that regard, but you can't really govern for a municipality. Financial recovery plans are a little bit different because then you've done an intervention. And what we also do is in your financial recovery plan, National Treasury writes our financial recovery plans, and then we have the obligation of having to impose it. So what you'll see in every financial recovery plan are specific targets for when you're in phase 1, and what are the targets, and how do you get to phase 2, and how do you get to phase 3, and how do you get out of the financial recovery plan. So I think maybe we must just have a bit of a think in terms of targets in that regard, because if someone doesn't meet a particular target, you're not necessarily going to move them to the next phase, because we need to make sure that we also walk the path with the municipality that is not just. It mustn't just be the provincial treasury is doing something. It must be the national treasury, the provincial treasury, the municipalities working with one another, not only to get out of the financial recovery plan, for example, but that once you're out of the financial recovery plan, that you're okay on your own. Because the last thing that you actually want is for municipality to be under a financial recovery plan. But just on some of those targets, if we can just get some feedback on that. But definitely something we can have a look at to see how we can tighten up some of those items. In terms of reports and assessments, there are certain things that will be just a report. So for example, the repero is technically like a tabling or a report. So we will table the pero. We will table the MERO. We will always look for innovation within the PERO and the MERO, and the budget committee then interrogates those type of documents. The budget, for example, we table 2 budgets a year. Sometimes we table 3. There's been extraordinary circumstances, like, for example, during the COVID year where more than 2 budgets were tabled. But what goes into the budget is informed by the policies in government and how we do things through the budget process and what departments are putting forward, and what cabinet at the end of the day decides as what the budget is, because it gets adopted by cabinet. But for example, the provincial treasury is able to table the 2 budgets on behalf of the Western Cape government. But I'll just ask that, and there's some other documents that also we have to do. For example, we do assessments in municipalities. If a municipality, for example, does not wish to take up the guidance or the advice of the provincial treasury, it's still within their mandate to say, we disagree with the provincial treasury, we're not going to do this. However, that doesn't take away from the view of the provincial treasury to do assessments, for example. So it does become difficult in that regard to then say you want a particular thing to occur, but it's not in your control for it to occur in that regard. For example, another example of the reports that we put in is, for example, we tabled the public procurement reports. And what happens in Q1 and Q2 might not be the same, and Q3 might not be the same. Every year's procurement plans from departments might not be the same. So your procurement plans, every department has a procurement plan, and you draft your own department's procurement plan. But when we pool the data of the procurement, we don't decide what that data is. We pull the data as is and we publish the data. So what is in the report and the ability to table the report, I do think that there's some difference in that. However, nothing prevents, for example, the committee, if it wishes for us to deal with a particular matter, particular target, to unpack what the qualitative part is of those particular reports or those particular matters, such as, for example, the procurement disclosure reports that we publish. In terms of the local government and risks, I know there's been some information that we published on pages 21 and 22 of the APP, but perhaps if the team can just come into the risks and the upcoming local government election. I think some of these particular risks we actually share with local government department because we work quite closely with one another. Because if there is a risk of coalitions increasing, then there's going to be a risk of governance issues, there's going to be a risk of financial issues, and how we respond to that. And if the team can just assist with the gender-based budgeting, I know some information has been published on, I think, page 22, but if we can just go into the detail about how we specifically, practically deal with that, as well as the municipal borrowing, just the process, how it fits into the ABF, how municipal loans committees work. And I do know, for example, maybe if the team can also just come in regarding the public participation, and in that regard for municipal loans. On the court case, if it succeeds, so we separated our challenge on the procedure. It does not mean necessarily we won't challenge the substantive items in the Act, but we are currently embarking first on the procedural items on the court case. If it is successful, then it is our hope that we wouldn't have to challenge the substance, but we reserve our right to substantively challenge the Act as well. It's not off the table. In terms of the impact on service delivery, because the regulations are not in place yet, it doesn't currently have a direct implication, but there could be an implication, and perhaps if the team can just specifically speak to those type of costs and impact on the system. So, for example, one of the key substantive items that came through the Act is the centralization through various different sections of that Act, where centralization is either being moved from a province or municipality to the National Treasury, the Finance Minister, National Finance Minister, or, for example, the Office of the Public OPPO. Public, what's the word now? Procurement officer, sorry, it's been a long day. Public procurement officer, OPPO. And in that regard, we also have to look at, for example, the Afri business case. That was the previous case before this now. In that case, it went first to the Supreme Court of Appeal, and they said, okay, the regulations at the time were invalid because of preference and set-asides, etc., etc. By the time it got to the Constitutional Court actually said the question about the set-asides and the preference, etc., is actually there's actually a larger question. The larger question is, can the National Finance Minister decide the public procurement policy, the procurement policy for a different organ of state? And we are a different organ of state to national. So part of the reason that those regulations were set aside was actually that the national minister cannot actually decide our public procurement policy for us. So you can put a framework in place, but you can't decide what we want to do in terms of the nitty-gritty rules of our particular policy. In this regard, even then, those set-asides in those regulations then were then put aside and so on. And I'm quite proud of the fact that in our province, we exceed the national targets on things like Black-owned businesses in our procurement spend without set-asides and without mandatory subcontracting. So even without the new regulations and without the law, we're already exceeding what National Treasury has asked provinces in terms of its target. So it's not impossible, not impossible. You don't need a law in order to have transformation in your system. It's not a either or situation. You can have growth, you can have job creation, you can have value for money, and you can have redress. You can have transformation. You don't need set-asides in order to achieve it. You don't need mandatory subcontracting in order to achieve it. And those are part of substantive issues that we need to consider as a country as to what exactly are we trying to fix. In terms of things like cost, some of the systems that we would have to put in place based on the Act, it would be quite costly. Not only would it be costly for us, it would be even more costly so actually for municipalities, because some municipalities actually can't afford to put new systems in place in order to simply comply with the Act. And in that regard, some municipalities won't even necessarily have the money to even challenge the Procurement Act, never mind being able to put those systems in place. So as a province, we really do need to also, we take that input from municipalities to hear their concerns, and those concerns were raised at one of our provincial governance and budget forums where municipalities said, we agree that we must challenge this Public Procurement Act in this regard. If I remember correctly, that was the November Provincial Budget and Governance Forum last year, where those concerns were particularly raised. But I'll just ask the team, Chair, just to come in with more of the technical details on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. So maybe let's start first with the performance information. And just to say that, and I think the members are quite au fait with the fact that at the back there is a technical indicator description. So some of them will explain why we see the numbers changing and the movement. Some might have the actual municipality together with the entity, etc. So there's a explanation that will help the understanding in terms of the movement, in terms of the number. I think that's the easy one. I think the more complex issue is the issue that Member Nkondlo raised around issues around impact, and how would our indicators demonstrate that we are actually achieving the impact that we want to, or that we set out to achieve. And I think last year, we started to articulate a strategy in terms of our own budget reform agenda in this province around how would we use performance information to inform the decisions ultimately around policy and therefore also the impact that we want to achieve. So it's I think the point raised and made is valid. It speaks to what the AG terms as the lived reality of the citizen. And it also speaks to the policy priority as in the intent of the PSP, of the 7th administration, to talk about the resident and the lived reality of the resident, and how do we create hope, etc. And that is a more complex a way of looking at it. I can say it's a journey. We have acknowledged that in the MTBPS of last year, and it is important that the system itself will need to mature over time to get us to that point. And I think that is what the committee is asking us. And we're acknowledging that. It's something that we are acutely aware of and that we are working towards. It's not just work that we're doing on our own here in the Provincial Treasury, but we are partnering with the Department of the Premier on this particular matter. So I think that is ultimately there's an agreement, especially where we are needing to respond to the continuum about not doing harm or doing good when it comes to the citizen. I think from where we're coming from, we're acknowledging that it is a journey, and we are beginning to put the building blocks in place in order to get us. So we are not there yet, but we are moving there. And I'm responding to that particular question because it also reflects on how we have couched our indicators. So there is in the narrative an acknowledgement that that is the journey, that is where we need to go. But we need to take things, we are saying we are taking it step by step. But I think that's a very valid point raised, and ultimately I think it's already in our planning documents, and now we need to move the system and also our own how we craft and how we look at our indicators to be able to show that the impact that we want to achieve. Then, Chair, there was the issue I think around gender-based gender budgeting. And I think if we, so it is in the narrative, but I must also say not everything that we do has got, find itself in our APP as a particular indicator. So there are things that we do at a sub-program level, perhaps, definitely, that is not necessarily captured as a separate indicator. But when we talk about gender budgeting, then what are we actually talking about? It is around our fiscal strategy and how our fiscal strategy will deal with issues around equality, women, girls, etc., etc. And then I think in terms of our fiscal strategy, at the moment, given the number of constraints, so we're not saying it's not happening. It is happening, but perhaps not as explicit as it would warrant a particular indicator in our APP. I think there's also an issue around how would our system respond to our ability to come to this committee then and say, this is how we're going to look at gender budgeting. For instance, we need to tag some of the expenditure. The team would be able to expand on this budget tagging. So those are not things necessarily that we have. We are certainly thinking about it. This work that we had, the National Department also asked us now, how does this budget respond to ICT and tagging of ICT expenditure? But I think there's like I've said in terms of the indicator and the impact and the type of indicators that land in our APP, similar to this. I think there's a systems aspect that we need to tackle. There's also around a broader fiscal strategy, even whether our current instruments gives us sufficient foundation in order to respond to gender-based budgeting. But it's certainly something that we started, and I think we've highlighted that in our strategy documents previously as well. But yeah, it's something that we need to, we're acknowledging that if that is where we want to go, then our fiscal strategy needs to expand by leaps and bounds in terms of just the envelope. And I think for now, our focus is on getting the maximum out of the sources that we have in order to give effect to these types of initiatives that we are wanting to pursue. But that does not mean it's not happening. I think we can comfortably come back to the committee and indicate how much our expenditure is on issues around gender. As a vote, we can show that. I mean, in terms of our policies, who are we targeting? When we issue bursaries, for instance, and that cuts across all the departments. So it's not as if it's not. I can safely say it's happening. It's not necessarily an indicator in our in our APP, and it's perhaps not as explicit when we speak to our fiscal strategy as a whole, but we are currently trying to deal with just getting in what is due to us, like Minister has already indicated. We do have, and just in terms of the role of PT, in terms of borrowing from municipalities, we have an integrated team. We have a committee within the Provincial Treasury, and I'm going to ask Malcolm as the head of fiscal policy, just to speak to that, but also Malcolm, the entire process and how does that report then, where does it end up, and then in terms of what we do from there. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Actually, yes, member, it's a very important question in terms of municipal borrowing. In terms of the process that is being followed, the section in terms of the MFMA is section 46. And both National Treasury and Provincial Treasury and the public has to be consulted when the municipality incurs a loan. So as Provincial Treasury, we also consider the comments that National Treasury has made. But in terms of our assessment that we conduct, we look at whether the municipality conforms with the laws and the regulations in terms of section 46 of the MFMA, and then we also do a credibility assessment in terms of the ratio analysis, both over 2 financial years, the most recent financial year and the previous financial year, and then also an in-year assessment. Municipalities have basically 2 occasions in which they consult with the public in terms of borrowing which they wish to incur, at the time when they prepare and table their budget, and at the event when they go out to the market to incur the borrowing. I just need to highlight that we do not shy away from saying no in the cases where we believe that municipalities have reached the upper limits of their borrowing requirements. So there have been instances where we have said no. Council need to reconsider the decision as a whole or the amount. And on the flip side, there's also been in cases where borrowing has also been proven to be to the benefit in terms of unlocking economic growth. Thank you.
Through you, Minister just reminded me systems costs in terms of procurement. Isaac, are you going to deal with that one? Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I think maybe we should reflect in terms of the analysis that we've done on the 2017 regulations, in which now they have indicated quite a lot of those issues have found itself within the new Procurement Act in terms of the area of targeting. At that particular point in time, we've indicated to the National Treasury that, you know, in the way that they want to do the targeting, it's going to increase the cost significantly. What we've indicated to them that, you know, particularly now, it's probably the 5th iteration of procurement policy. What is required is that you actually establish an enabling environment for businesses. So, for instance, what we proved to them at that particular point in time, and I think the minister have alluded to them, that without these policies, we could actually reach the targets. And if we blindly just follow those areas that they've targeted, it will increase the cost. Now, the reason why we feel that implementing the policies as how the national has decided is that we've started with the process over these years and setting our supplier database. In our supplier database, 83% of those companies are already small companies. And if you look at the supplier base, 74% is actually black if you look at it. So if you have changed your supplier database and you go out on the open market and those companies' response, you will see that without any particular targeting, you can actually, allocate contracts in terms of how the database have been compiled. For instance, at this particular point in time, in terms of the 24-25 financial year, 53% of the value of contracts have been allocated to black business. So our indication to them is, if you just change the way that you implement, you can actually reach those particular targets. And hence, in 2017, there were certain areas that we have not implemented in the way that they wanted. We've alternative mechanisms, and we could reach those targets. In fact, the current procurement policy as far as preferential procurement is concerned is even more draconian. You know, which we do believe it will take us back as a province in terms of the areas, and it also will have an impact on in terms of our commodity approach, because the approach that's in the preferential procurement is one size fit all. And the industries are different. We, for instance, have some industries in the Western Cape. Let's take, for instance, learner transport, where 95% of the industry has already been transformed. So why would you implement certain policies where your industry has already been transformed? And it's those kind of value-added comments that we've made to the National Treasury. And if we implement the policy as it's indicated in the Act, we do foresee, you know, that our cost is going to increase. And taking into account the fiscal constraints, and Nadia made that point, that currently the Act is actually divorced from the PFMA. And the PFMA is actually directive as far as the fiscus is concerned. And removing those two things will also make us lead to the fact that when you decide on procurement contracts, you know, the PFMA is not linked to that. And that has been our lead instrument over the last couple of years. So I think also there might be a misconception that we're actually against you know, empowerment and preferential procurement. However, I think this province can show that we've done a lot over these years, and even in terms of our dashboard analysis that we published, is also proving that it is about value for money, and we do believe that some areas of that Act actually doesn't lead to value for money, and there are other alternatives to reach the same kind of objectives. For instance, maybe one of the issues that I want to mention, the National Treasury have always indicated procurement up to 1 million that you need 3 quotes. Our viewpoint was always you target the open market and you get much better officers. So that was just an alternative to ensure that we do get service delivery, but also that we broaden the market. So there's more companies that can take initiative as far as that procurement opportunities are concerned. And I think we've been in the past if a lot of discussions about procurement and also empowerment, particularly in this committee. But I think the important thing is that we must probably look at the evidence over the last couple of years in terms of what we've achieved from an economic perspective as far as procurement is concerned.
Thank you very much. I'm looking at members. Have we exhausted all questions? It looks as if members Bryant and Gondlo are not ready for tea yet.
I'm ready for tea, but I asked quite a specific question that wasn't answered in terms of the service provider, how the service provider was decided on, and the fact that through illness, the entire process was scuppered. So how is that embarked on, and what was the specific role that service provider was engaging in at the time?
Okay, Chair, maybe I should just give a little bit of context. In the beginning of the calendar year, about February, we've got assessments, the technical assessments with all of the municipalities. And out of those assessments, we did design then support plans to see where municipalities need support. Now, of course, also in the Provincial Treasury, we've got also a limited unit that looks at audit and risk compliance. They need to assist municipalities. And what we've done, we've got a transversal contract in place where we actually identified service providers that in the case where we're not able to assist that municipality, that we then get those service providers to assist. So we've got a panel of those service providers. So it's not one service providers. However, we've got quite a number of municipalities that we need to adhere to. So we go to a procurement process. We identify the capability. I think in this particular case, unfortunately, in terms of when we had to deliver in a particular quarter, unfortunately, this specific service provider have fell ill, and although it affected the timeline, it didn't affect the quality of the work that eventually they've performed. So I think this is probably one of those areas that you have not foreseen, but it is service providers that we've got across the disciplines within the provincial treasury. So when there is a need at the specific municipality, and there are quite a number of municipalities that in this vulnerable position, that we need to assess, which we've done in this particular case. And the unfortunate thing that it's a timing issue, and it's not about the quality of the work that the company have performed. But I think what you basically want to indicate whether there is a contingency plan in place if that should happen. I think taking into account the work that needed to be performed, it was not from an emergency perspective, and we could move that to the next quarter. But we take note of the comments that you've made. But I want to ensure you it's not about the quality of the work that's been performed. It's just the timing when it was performed, and of course the assistance to the municipalities. And we will probably find ourselves with some of the municipalities. We'll probably find ourselves in a similar position next year, where we will have to assist those municipalities because quite a number of them do not have the capacity to do it themselves, and hence the reliance on the provincial treasury to do that.
Thank you, Chair. I worry when officials start speaking like politicians, then you must know we're in trouble. I must just say that up front. Chair, HOD, I hear you explaining the journey. Now I'm sitting here trying to understand in the questions that I've asked. When you have matters that are raised in the book, but as you say, there's a lot of other things that are done in the department, but you won't find them in the target setting. And there is a saying that if you can't measure it, it does not exist. And an important issue like gender responsive budgeting, which is a principal matter, which will be interested, as you say, you can, as you say, you can tell us as provincial treasurer, the extent to which you are integrating gender-related matters. And gender-related matters are not only about women, it's the actual balance, So who is going to be doing that work? On whose time? If, as you say, we can't find it, it's not a target anyway, it's not an indicator anyway. So when people are undertaking these activities that are not necessarily set in the target setting, which resources are they using? Why these things are outside of the targets? I'm not understanding that logic. I'm not understanding, but I was asking also the municipalities in distress, where are we going to see? Because we want to see that you are looking at the issue of Beaufort West. We were there with the minister. She was very emphatic about the situation of that municipality when we were oversight. We can't find it here. Where is it? Somebody is doing something to look at it. I'm not sure it's also in the number of reports. That is how you monitor it. You're going to be looking at so it's somewhere in those reports. I'm just not clear, on this matter and on the journey, and at what point this journey where we can start seeing the qualitative aspects, because the truth of the matter, when I look at all actually almost all, and if I'm incorrect, you must show me one where indeed outside of the quantitative indicators, you can indicate a qualitative one that says, after we've gotten the numbers, then what? How do we prove that indeed this number of reports are up to scratch to what you are looking at the municipality? So I'm leaving that as a comment. Perhaps in the journey, Chair, we are going to be appraised by the department at a point when the journey is able to help us to understand exactly the number of documents that this provincial treasury, in assessment reports, in this and the other, at what point can we look, because the questions that we're asking here at most are more qualitative questions. So this is where the problem is going to be, because it's going to look like as if, we're people who are not understanding our work. Because what you have put to us, and you have came to this committee and you have presented your APP and you have said to us, we must then oversight you on the basis of what you have said there. And you have said a number of reports, 6. So all I must look at is the number. If you're achieving 6, how do I engage whether the quality of that 6 is actually making any sense? So that is just my comment, Chair, that what you cannot measure, I can't accept an answer that says gender-based budgeting is somewhere it is done, but it is not yet. Because if you can't measure it, it means you're not doing gender-based budgeting. You're still discussing amongst yourselves around this concept, but it's not something that you are implementing at this point. Thanks.
Thanks, Member Mkondlo. I don't know if the department wants to respond at this stage. But, I mean, we could deal with it in another response as well.
Oh, sorry.
My hand was up.
I think we can probably put that through in terms of a question, and we can get a response on that. I see members Masipa and Member Mbombo. I just want to take a quick comfort break. Member Brian, can you perhaps just sit in the chair in the meantime?
Member Masipa.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'm answered quite extensively on the cost, but I do think that the missing part is on the service delivery, and I'm a little bit concerned about, how this is going to impact on service delivery if the work was done to just really assess if service delivery is going to be impacted. And I'm not talking on the cost basis, but on the delivery side of it, really, because the turnaround, the centralization, as to how quick we will be able to get to the service delivery in terms of, contracting with our service providers as such, going forward with this kind of model that, the National Treasury is trying to put in place. Thanks, Chair. That's really it from my side.
Thanks. I think Member Mbombo had a question.
Sorry if I'm repeating. Can you just remind me the 5 indicators for the fiscal policy? What are those? It's program 2. Part of the indicators for the fiscal policy, I think 5. Am I correct? In the presentation, in the PowerPoint, the indicators. Okay, what are the indicators for the fiscal policy? We've got that.
Have you got it? Okay.
Okay, I'll ask the question once I hear.
Thank you so much. On the reporting on the gender-based budgeting, I think we can definitely improve on the reporting on that. And I think we'll just have to try and figure out how such reporting then occurs and how to put that type of data together. I know, for example, we do a little bit of it in procurement as well, but more in that space when we do those type of publications. But I think maybe in terms of reporting for the work that we do in terms of our APP and those items we can improve upon, and we can come back to the committee on that item. On the things like, for example, Beaufort West. So when legally you have to impose a financial recovery plan. So now for Kanland is the same and Theodorskloof is the same. So the law says National Treasury must write the financial recovery plan. Okay. Then there's targets in your financial recovery plan. And we can, for example, give input to National Treasury about what we think those targets should look like. The members of the public can give input as to what those targets can look like. And then, they will respond to us to say, we agree with you, we include, or we disagree, we don't include, and so on. Then I sign off the financial recovery plan, and then it must be imposed in terms of law. If a municipality does not reach the targets in a financial recovery plan, the question is then going to be, who takes responsibility for that? Because it's twofold. We have to work together as a team, the National Treasury, Provincial Treasury, and the municipality in order to reach the targets. But you also want the system to move so that when you're out of the financial recovery plan, that you don't need to end up again in a financial recovery plan. So some municipalities, depending on their capacity and how fast they move in terms of those type of things, will move faster than others. And it's not every municipality is the same. Now, for example, we could put into our target set based on the financial interventions that we must produce, that we must impose, for example, 3 financial recovery plans. So the question is then, does one put every target, because earlier a question was also asked of us to take out targets that are based on external stakeholders. So now the other question is then, okay, if majority of the targets are based on the fact that you have to work with external stakeholders, and your target might not be achieved because of external stakeholders, should we then put it into our APP? It's a double-edged sword, but we mustn't leave those targets. We must continue working on those targets so that we can make sure that as a team we get out of our financial recovery plans. The other type of documents, there are certain documents that we do have to just do. We have to do our cash management reports. We have to do our assessments. We have to publish budgets. We have to publish certain research documents. So there's certain things that we do have to just publish. However, I think something that we can have a look at is how we can bring the qualitative items from those work out and not just the quantitative version of that work. I know that we go quite into detail into chapter B of the APP as to the qualitative work. And then when you look at the indicators, that speaks more to the quantitative work. But however, that is then homework that we need to have a look at to see how we can then say, how do we bring the qualitative work out? For example, we have to do SEM assessments in the province for departments, but you can't decide for a department, am I going to procure 10 pens instead of 8? Am I going to procure 10 needles instead of 8? The department as the expert must decide in and of itself its procurement plan. But you must be that enabling and reliable partner supporting in terms of being able to do procurement and SEM assessments and so on, for example. In terms of the fiscal policy targets, I think that's the ones related on page 52. Is it page 52? 50. 2.2 fiscal policy. Yes, okay. That's relating to the research reports on provincial and local government fiscal system. That's our research reports. And then we have our number of provincial revenue management reports, and that's the revenue items. We have the cash management reports for the provincial government. And you have to publish cash management reports. It is what it is in that regard. You have your reports on the performance of the Western Cape Gambling and Racing Board. and you have your number of consolidated revenue retention reports produced. And those are the output indicators 2.2.1, 0.1 to 5 in this regard. Yes. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. I'm just checking. Have we covered all questions? Okay.
Sorry, apologies. I just remembered I forgot to answer one question was regarding the service delivery being impacted of the Procurement Act. So if you're going to spend more money on a system, you're going to have less money in your budget for service delivery. So I can't tell you specifically, okay, we're going to build one less school or we're going to buy 10 less pens because I'm not there. I'm not there. But I can say that if you're going to spend that extra 10 Rand because you have to implement a new system from National Treasury, you're going to have 10 Rand less in the budget. And then from a budget committee, the budget committee is going to come to me and say, but Deirdre, why is there 10 Rand less in the budget for the services in the province? And the answer is going to be, but if the law says I must put new things in place, we're going to have less money for service delivery. So it's definitely would impact service delivery. It might not be in a direct manner as one might think of it, but every Rand less that we have in the budget will impact service delivery.
Thank you very much. I'm just looking at members. I think we are covered. So I think thank you very much for the presentations that you have provided us with today. I think it certainly has been most insightful. And I think being Tuesday afternoon and being past 3 o'clock, I know Provincial Treasury, it is tea time and coffee time and refreshments at this stage. So thank you very much for being with us today. And enjoy the rest of the afternoon and the week. I think you are excused at this stage. Committee will remain behind just to conclude on our remaining matters. Thank you very much. Right, colleagues, I think we've now concluded that session. And I think we've just got to now just consider the what resolutions and any recommendations that we want to make, and then we've got a couple of draft minutes that we need to deal with, and that's what we have between us and tea time. I must say I'm was particularly concerned at how thin and sparse the documentation was that was brought to this committee. I think from an APP, I would have thought, looking at the actual document, this was there was perhaps it was perhaps not done as well as it could have been done in terms of that documentation. And I think what we perhaps just need to think how we're going to deal with that. And I think from the quarterly reports as well, we certainly didn't see the financials coming here. And I think, looking at the performance indicators, they were also not done. I would have thought at the type of professional standard that we might well have expected. And I think what concerns me is we've taken almost 2.5 hours of this process being spoken through with very little documentation in front of us. So I'm not sure what comments are from yourselves and how we perhaps deal with this.
Chair, I agree with you. And I also think it makes our jobs easier if we have more information at our fingertips, because we don't then have to ask all the probing questions and take all the time asking, because we have it at our fingertips. If, for instance, that issue with the service provider had been detailed in the minutes, I wouldn't have to have asked that question. Although I am still concerned that we have a contract that is reliant on one individual's health. If that individual had, for instance, to have passed away, touch wood, then what would happen to that process, for instance? So for me, that's quite concerning, and I do think that we need to drill into that. So I've got a recommendation for two things. The first one is, as we mentioned, and I requested earlier, potentially a presentation on the financial interventions taking place at municipalities and the status of those, and more information. And then I do think as well, we need to have a presentation on the current agreements with service providers in terms of providing assistance to municipalities and who those service providers are. The whole process should be transparent, and there's no need to keep anybody's identity secret or anything like that. It's important for us to know that and find out where we stand. That's our job in oversight. So that's a recommendation from my side. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. I think most of us will probably agree with that. Member Mbombo?
Thank you. We normally have the APP book. What happened to the APP book? Because that's where actually you'll have the whole of the information. We normally have this thick book. I don't recall whether we had it electronic, because, for example, when I was, like you were talking about the report, like they'll put a program and then they'll say like a budget policy and then 5 APP indicators. So I'm asking because I wanted to follow in terms of what are those indicators, which is they also have to fumble and keep on checking, because I'm interested, what are these 5 indicators, so that I could be able to see in terms of them. So I was making an assumption that this is just a summary, but they're supposed to be APP book. Where do you know, Pio? Where's what happens to the APP book?
The APPs were handed out to us earlier in the year. Certainly, it was on my shelf. Unfortunately, hadn't taken it last week, so when I came.
Sorry, Chair, through you. Not the ARP, because remember the APP. If you recall, last year, the AG made a suggestion that before the government completes their annual performance plan, we need to make an input, because they cannot be able to change down the line later. So then that's when now we were trying, but unfortunately, it was about putting the cart before the horse, because
the law doesn't allow it because the departments submit to the Premier. And the Premier, once now they are done, that's where now writes to the Speaker. And then that's where now each department writes to the Speaker that they have completed it for those. So for the APP from 1st of April to now, there's no way that we will have received it previous year because it's for now, because they couldn't be able to complete it before March. So that's why probably maybe, I don't know.
Yes, if we look at I think in the presentation that they gave us, there's a timetable in which these documents need to be prepared. And what does concern me that we are in August and we're only dealing with APP at this stage. So we are well into the year already. We are into what's the second quarter of the year, and it's only been down here. So, partly, and it's not only this department, I found the same with other committees that I sit on as well, that we need to chase, in effect, the APPs and the strategic plan. So it's certainly something that I think needs to get taken up. I suppose just on an APP point of view, one of the thoughts that have gone through my mind is whether we should not be flipping through this now. And perhaps if we could send any aspects of the APP that we would like to be elaborated on, that we come back to procedural officer, say by Friday, that we can then, in terms of the resolutions and the recommendations that we make, ask for certain specific issues there, because certainly the APP includes in this that all the technical indicators placed at the back here, but there are also various aspects, including risks and various other aspects that are included in this APP. And then there, within the strategic plan, no doubt there will be certain aspects there that we could, if it was presented properly, we could well have dealt with them at that stage. Member Nkondlo?
No, thanks, Chair. I support your proposal on what we're sitting with now, because I also, as I made the reference, that the APP, I think the electronic one, we received the document, I think on Friday, sent by Zahid. Okay. All right. So I think what we would have to do going forward, I support the immediate now in dealing with what is sitting in front of us. But I think we really need to have a conversation about how do we engage the annual performance plan process at timely where we can make the inputs. Because the truth of the matter is that when AG comes at the end, and we ask questions, we are always referred to the very APP process that we would have missed to ask particular questions. So we can't, like, we are neglecting our duty to make the necessary inputs, because now it's after effect, and actually you are correct, Chair, it's very late, it's already to second quarter, and there's little that we can do about it. So I think perhaps this is a conversation that we really need to look at. How do we take up the process when the departments are starting the APPs? Before they conclude on them, they need to bring them to us as committees, and we sit and look at them so that the final product at least is something that together would have been able to influence where it's necessary and where we can. So I wanted to make that suggestion, and I take, because I would also want to make my written submissions then to the Friday process as you were suggesting.
Thank you for that, Member Bryant.
Thanks, Chair. I think full agreement from my side as well. I just think the point is, it's great to have the APP, have the big document. It's more about when one's doing a presentation, and if you're presenting on your quarterly performance, to have a detailed presentation. I don't think it is reasonable to expect members to be fully au fait with every page of the APP. I mean, that's the whole point of a presentation. So all we'll be asking for is more detail perhaps in those presentations so that we don't then have to interrogate every single one of those quarterly performance targets that are being presented. Thanks. But in agreement. Thank you.
Yeah, but I also believe, in terms of the quarterly the quarterly performance reports, I believe those should be coming to standing committees as well. I'd being at education before, I'd called for a quarterly report, and then I was questioned by the department to say, but we've not done this before. And I said, but I come out of a municipality where it is a standard practice that the council receives. You don't need to ask for it. A council receives a quarterly report. That is part of the law, part of the act. And we should be in a similar type of situation here. So it's certainly something that I believe that needs attention, that we also need to pick up on. I don't know, is there anything further that we wish to deal with at this stage? Or shall we just get that documentation in and those questions, and then we can submit from there? We in general agreement? Okay, members Bryant and Wombo have agreed as well. Okay, then I think we can move on, procedural officer, to our minutes. I think of the 12th of August and of the 19th of August. And I think the 1 minute will probably go quickly and the other one will take quite a long time, especially the one of the 19th. I think that's up on the screen there for us. The one on the 12th would have dealt with the blended finance presentation. Yes. Yeah.
Post there.
Thank you. Yeah. Who else would have been in that meeting? Finance before that.
I second.
Okay, and then I think it's the one of the 19th. That was a long meeting.
Yeah, I propose that we accept these minutes.
Thank you. Okay. Right. Okay, and you, Constable, seconds. So I think that concludes the work of our meeting, procedural officer. Thank you very much for all that you've done for us today, and I think that means that our meeting is now adjourned. Thank you very much.